Hello and Tashdale everyone, welcome to class 12 biology. In this video we will discuss about adaptive radiation. So we will try to understand what is adaptive radiation, what are the examples available for adaptive radiation. In order to understand what is adaptive radiation, we need to look at Sir Charles Darwin's voyage. So in my previous video I told you that Sir Charles Darwin in 1831 he took a voyage in a British naval ship called HMS Beagle. So the voyage lasted about 5 years, and during that time Darwin traveled all across the globe and he made observations about the geology and natural history, that is about the diversity of life. And his observations during his journey on HMS Beagle proved helpful in formulating his ideas regarding theory of evolution by natural selection. So one such location during his journey was Galapagos Island, where he made significant observations regarding his theory of evolution by natural selection. So Galapagos Islands are a group of small islands. Therefore, the Galapagos Islands are also called as archipelago. So these group of small islands, they are volcanic islands, right? And they are quite young on geological time scale. They are about 4 million years old. So these islands, they are formed due to volcanic activities in the Pacific Ocean. So Galapagos Islands, they are now part of Republic of Ecuador, and they are located about 900 kilometers from the coast of Ecuador. And on these islands, Sir Charles Darwin spent about 5 weeks. So as a naturalist, he was observing the geology and the biodiversity that was available on Galapagos Islands. So on these islands, he observed a huge biodiversity, and he observed that these biodiversity were endemic to the islands. So what do we mean by endemic? By endemic, we mean that these plants and animals, they were found only on Galapagos Islands and nowhere else, right? And he observed different plants and animals, and he observed different birds, right? Out of these animals, one thing which proved quite significant was his collection of these small birds. He collected about 12 different samples of birds, and initially he thought that these birds, they were 12 different species of unrelated birds, right? So he thought that these birds were totally unrelated and different species of birds, and he took these samples back to England, where he referred to his ornithologist friend Sir John Gould. And Sir John Gould, upon close examination, he told Charles Darwin that these birds were not unrelated, right? They were all 12 different species of finches, right? So they were all 12 different species of finches which were closely related. That really amazed Sir Charles Darwin, right? Therefore, these finches, now they are called as Darwin's finches, right? So the finches that are found on Galapagos Islands, they are now popularly known as Darwin's finches. So if you look closely at these Darwin's finches, they have got different beak shapes, right? They have got different beak shapes. Not just they vary in their plumage, they also vary in their beak shape, which is really prominent. Some of them, they have got really large beaks, some of them, they have got small pointy beaks. Now, if you think about the form and function aspect of these beaks, we know that beaks are used for eating food by the birds, right? So the different shapes of these beaks or different forms of these beaks could be explained by what kind of food these birds eat, right? So if you look at this particular bird with large beak, it is a large ground finch. So these finch, they eat large tough seeds. So in order to break open the seed coats of those large tough seed, they have got large beak shape. Whereas this warbler finch, they have got small pointy beaks because they eat insects. For eating insects, they don't need large beaks like ground finch. So these two finches, which are closely related to each other, two different species, which are closely related to each other, they have got different beak shapes because they depend on different food on the islands, right? So the form and function aspect of these beak, we have to think about that, right? So in order to make the things clear, I want you to watch this small video clip that I have extracted from a documentary. So I want you to watch that documentary. Therefore, I will give you a link of the documentary at the end of the video, which is available on YouTube, so you can watch that. I really want you to watch that. Right.
Rosemary, what's the important difference between these birds?
This little warbler finch with its very fine needle-like beak is perfect for picking off insects. This one is the woodpecker finch with a rather more robust beak. It concentrates on beetle larvae and termite larvae. Then we have the cactus finch with a much longer, sharp, pointed beak, which probes into cactus flowers. And then these three species are the large, medium, and small ground finches. So, Sean, the basic idea is the beaks are tools, and you need the right tool for the right job.
The finches look so different that Darwin first mistook them for entirely unrelated kinds of birds. How did the Galapagos end up with so many species of finches?
So when Sir John Gould, the ornithologist, told Sir Charles Darwin that these different species of finches, they are closely related to each other, Darwin gave a deep thought about how to explain the variety of finches found on Galapagos Island. And his explanation went something like this. He said that all these varieties of finches, they evolved on the island itself from the original seed-eating ancestor. So the original seed-eating ancestor, right, it arrived maybe from the South American continent, from the mainland to the Galapagos Island, and from that ancestral seed-eating species, all these different varieties of finch species, they have evolved on the island itself, right? And the different forms of beaks or the altered beaks, they arose as they tried to adapt to the various habitats of the Galapagos Island, right? So when the ancestor species, when they arrived on the Galapagos Island, they have to adapt on the Galapagos Island. They have to eat the food that are available on the Galapagos Island, right? So there was stiff competition, and they tried to eat different foods available over there, right? And when they tried to eat different foods over there in order to survive, different forms of beaks arose, and gradually they became, or they evolved into these different varieties of finch species. Now when we think about evolution over here, in other words, we can say that the process of evolution of different species in a given geographical area, starting from a point and literally radiating to other areas of geography, is called adaptive radiation. So now we have the definition of adaptive radiation over here, right? The process of evolution. So adaptive radiation is nothing but a process of evolution of different species. In this particular case, different species of finches, right, in a given geographical area. So the geographical area is Galapagos Island, right, starting from a point. So the point is the seed-eating ancestor which arrived from the mainland, right, and literally radiating to the other areas of the geography means they now become specialized to eat different food, right? So their beak shape, they have evolved to eat or depend upon different kinds of food. Right? And that particular process of evolution of different species is called as adaptive radiation, right? Now in this particular process of evolution, there is formation of different species, or new species is formed, and like I told you before, that particular process is also called as speciation. The formation of new and distinct species in the course of evolution is called as speciation. There are two forms of speciation I have given over here, but there are more than that. I have given two important forms of the major forms of types of speciation: sympatric speciation and allopatric speciation. Sympatric speciation is the formation of two or more descendant species from a single ancestral species, all occupying the same geographic location. So if the speciation happens in the same geographical location, then it is called as sympatric speciation. Whereas allopatric speciation is a speciation that happens when two populations of the same species become isolated from each other due to geographical changes. So let's say we have an original species which becomes separated by some geographical barrier, and they evolved into two different species. That is called as allopatric speciation. Whereas sympatric speciation, the original species, they evolve into different species on the same geographical location. So that is two types of speciation, right? So if you look closely, sympatric speciation is the adaptive radiation, right? So now Australian marsupials is another example of adaptive radiation, right? So one example was the finches. So that was one example. That was one classic example of adaptive radiation. So now another example for adaptive radiation is Australian marsupials. So on one geographical location, that is on Australian continent, all these marsupial species, they arose from one common ancestor. So that is also an adaptive radiation, since they try to adapt on different they try to adapt and they evolve into different species. It is called as adaptive radiation, right? That is thing. And when more than one adaptive radiation appear to have occurred in a geographical location, we call it as a convergent evolution. Now this word has come again over here, right? Last time when we discussed about homology, right, I told you that homology is due to divergent evolution and analogy is due to convergent evolution. So over here this thing has come again, right? When more than one adaptive radiation appear to have occurred in a geographical location, we call it a convergent evolution. So if you look over here, the Australian marsupials, they have evolved into different species from one common ancestor. Likewise, placental mammals of the other area, they have also evolved from a common ancestor. And if you look closely, there is a similarity between the two. And this similarity between the two is not due to common ancestor, but because of their commonality or the similarity in their adaptive location, right, where they are trying to adapt. So therefore these are called as convergent evolution. So the Tasmanian wolf that was found in Australia resembles the wolf in other continents because they adapted in a similar way. Not that they came from same ancestor, but they adapted in a similar way, so therefore they look similar. So this is convergent evolution. Okay, so that is about adaptive radiation. Now about the video that I was telling you about, I want you to type down this link in your web browser, and this is a YouTube link to the video, to the documentary video of these two people, Peter and Rosemary Grant, who did about 30 years of study on Darwin's finches on Galapagos Island, and it's a very beautiful video where you will be, I think you will be fascinated by what they found during their 30 years of study. So these are two evolutionary biologists. I'm really sure that you will like this documentary video about these two people, right? So in the next video we will discuss about biological evolution and mechanisms of evolution. I hope you know what you have to do. You have to read about that and watch the next video. Thank you.